Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Circle's very last briefing for 2020. What a way to end one of the most epic years for the Circle. After 27 years of live events and bringing people together in the boardroom, we this year, as most of you know, pivoted and did everything online, and today is our final one for 2020. And as I said, what a way to end. We are so delighted to have you all with us. Before I commence, I would like to acknowledge the custodians of the land and pay our tribute to both past, present and future, for they hold the memories, traditions and hopes for Indigenous Australia. Today, we have a wonderful event for you with the CEO of Cricket Australia. Thank you so much for being with us, Nick. It's great to have you here. As I was saying before, Nick's probably the luckiest guy in sport. He ended with a bang before COVID hit with 100,000 people at the MCG. And on New Year's Eve, he's hopefully going to have 75,000 people live. So really, Nick, it's an honour to have you with us. And thanks for being such a great support and such a good friend of the Circle. We're going to have a moderated discussion by Andrew Wildblood, Chief Executive Enterprise and Government from Vocus. Brian Lara will join us. Thank you, Brian, for being with us. That's fabulous. And we're going to have questions through the Q&A session. So we want this to be interactive. We want you to enjoy it. This is a fun one. We're very excited to have you all with us, and sit back and enjoy. And now I will happily hand over to Andrew to start the session. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Tanya, and an absolute honour for Johnny to have asked me to moderate here. Anyone who knows me knows I'm an absolute cricket tragic. I wish I'd had the talent of Brian Lara, but alas, I am still playing the game at 47 and doing my bit. But it's a delight to be able to have a chat with a fellow Englishman, Nick, about the role as Cricket Australia and what we're seeing in cricket and what's ahead for the summer. Also, a bit of reflection on the year that was. I mean, if you think about Nick coming into the role as the CEO of Cricket Australia, he's had to stare into some serious business challenges, both economic and, of course, what's gone on in the environment. So we'll hear a little bit about that. So I welcome Nick, if you're there. There he is, the man himself, Nick. Welcome, and lovely to chat to you again. It was, I think, the last time we met in person was the glorious days before COVID, when you were just about. Well, I remember at Trans-Tasman Business Event, actually, you were getting on stage encouraging everyone to come to the MCG for the women's T20 final, which we're trying to break a world record for. And of course, we got there or got very close. But I thought I might just reflect a bit on your background. How on earth did an Englishman from the Midlands, growing up a stone's throw from Edgbaston, of course, where Brian Lara did record some heroics as a player for Warwickshire. How on earth did you end up being the CEO of Cricket Australia? I thought I'd sort of check in with how you ended up, first of all, in Australia, and then what was your cricketing pedigree? So, Nick, tell me a little bit about your history.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and thank you to yourself, to the Circle for having me, and starstruck to have Brian on the phone. As you say, I grew up just around the corner from Edgbaston, and watched many appearances for Warwickshire and also for the West Indies. But no, really, cricket was my first love. My late father was a much more accomplished cricketer than I. Played for Middlesex young amateurs. You know, we had many of the big decisions in my growing up were made sitting next to Dad at Warwickshire, watching the cricket. And I suppose I represented Warwickshire at under 13 level. That was about the height of my cricketing powers, and really didn't have the skills to take it on. But then turned to rugby. I think rugby, a game of brute force more than skill. And really the reason I'm in Australia is because I shared a flat with 3 Aussies at university in England, played rugby with them. I think sport has given, sport is such a great connector. It's given me so much in terms of, friends and now career. And I came out to Australia for the first time and played against Sydney Boys High in Centennial Park. Got taught a bit of a lesson by the likes of Duncan McRae and Chris Whittaker, but really fell in love with the place, and have got many great friends here. I suppose my career is one of, I always used to say it's one of two halves, but it's now been, you know, more time in sport than not in sport. But leaving university, wanted to be a professional rugby player. I had one year as a semi-professional, and but didn't really know what to do. So trained as an accountant, a chartered accountant, and then went into the City of London and did corporate finance. A couple of years in Sydney, where I met my wife, and but then returned to London, and was very fortunate to get one of the early roles on the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. So I was employee number 100, 6 years out for the Games, which, you know, I think is, you know, putting on Olympics, and we can maybe talk a bit about what the challenges that they've got in Tokyo, but it is, you know, they call it the most complicated logistical exercise in peacetime. So it taught me a huge amount about projects. And the deal was with Lauren that once the games were out of the way, we would emigrate, and emigrated and got one of the early roles on the 2015 Cricket World Cup, which was co-hosted between Australia and New Zealand, and have been working and feel very privileged to have worked in Australian cricket ever since.
That's brilliant. The 2015 Cricket World Cup, I was fortunate enough to spend the whole game sitting next to the late, great Max Walker, Tangles. And it was an amazing experience because he was talking me through every ball. And I said to him, were you ever worried coming out in front of 100,000 people? He said, no, I loved it. But some people will really freeze here tonight, just as Stark uprooted Brendan McCullum's middle peg. And that set the tone for that final, of course, where Australia won. But then on to the women's and the men's, which has now been pushed back a couple of years, T20. And I just thought it was an amazing, and I must admit at the time, I was like, how's he going to do this? Ambition to try to get the world record for attendance at a professional female sporting event. Where did you get to in the end? And I think probably a massive, very smart move to sort of get a key act to come over and perform to pull in the crowds, but also plenty of people, tens of thousands of people there for a high quality cricket game. Any reflections on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The journey for the Women's T20 World Cup started just before the 2015 Cricket World Cup. So the hosting rights were awarded to Australia back in 2014. And I think it was 2015. It was that tournament, that final, that really showed us, you know, the power of hosting a Cricket World Cup in Australia. I mean, you'll see it again tomorrow in Adelaide. Just the passion and the large cohorts of fans that support all of the different competing countries. I mean, that's one of the reasons I just love now living in Australia, becoming Australian. It is a melting pot, and each of the teams can be assured of massive support. But, you know, we saw what we could do in 2015, and then we had the Women's T20 World Cup in 2020, and we just, but very much from the outset, thought we're not going to waste this opportunity. And then as we worked and we learnt more, it was around about the time that we initiated the Women's Big Bash League, which is now in its sixth year. Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have an incredible board on the organising committee. People that have really been instrumental to the growth of cricket as a sport for women and girls. So Belinda Clark, who's, you know, captained Australia more times than anyone else. James Sutherland, who's been absolutely instrumental. And, you know, we very quickly, the conversation changed from, you know, how big can we make this, to go, well, if we're genuine about equality and equality through sport, then there's only one answer, which is the women's needs to be the same as the men's. And that was our giving both equal billing was our guiding principle throughout. So people have asked me, you know, was it a difficult decision to play the match at the MCG? And in the end, it was a very quick conversation. It was the only decision. And I was at an event last night at the SCG with the Minerva Network. If anyone knows, or if you're not aware, worth looking up the Minerva Network. Fantastic group that does mentoring of elite athletes. But the discussion last night was how it actually became bigger than cricket. It actually became bigger than sport, and it was actually about equality. So Tanya and the Circle, hugely supportive as one of our champions, working with the likes of Liz Broderick, Kate Jenkins, and to be part of something like that has just been really the highlight of my career. And I think the challenge for all of us now is to make sure that we take that on and we don't lose that momentum through what we've gone through in COVID. And that's why we were very determined to play a full WBBL, which was completed 2 weeks ago in Sydney.
Amazing. And the participation rates are just growing. I mean, my young son playing under 12s cricket. There's frequently just all girls cricket games on alongside. And the women's team won the Don Award this year. So, the sort of momentum and feel good factor's still there. Are you seeing it? Are you seeing that come through in participation? Is more girls seeing it through the program?
Very, very much so. So that's where the growth is. And probably the biggest shame was, if I think about the next morning, I got a phone call at about 7 a.m. from Stuart Fox, and we actually had a COVID case in Bay N42. So we had all these programs set up for people that had watched the Women's T20 World Cup to come and have a go as really a launch pad into this season. Yeah. So they all had to be cancelled, but we've seen it come back really, really strongly. And probably for me, the two most kind of gratifying things, we've got the numbers, but anecdotally, we've got, I think that World Cup, you've got, people even like, dare I say, my wife or my mother-in-law, who've never really always go, Nick, will you turn off the cricket? Too much cricket. Yeah, they actually got massively absorbed into the tournament, and there were some amazing close finishes. And then on the flip side, I've got rugby mates who have never really taken too much of an interest in women's sport, who are on the WhatsApp completely absorbed by it. So, I think it, from both sides, it's really brought both traditionalists and also people that have never seen cricket. So from that perspective, we will be eternally grateful that we were able to be the last event before the pandemic. I mean, feel for Westy and the guys. The Grand Prix got cancelled 3 days later. We'll always be eternally grateful for that.
And the thing that I thought was beautiful as well, and I was fortunate enough to go to Bowral to watch a Fairbreak 11 game just before or during, I think I remember what it was. And girls playing from Vanuatu, Namibia, Holland, and the quality of play from developing nations. Of course, the Thai national team who played, and it's just that the spread of the game is just beautiful to see, right? And spread plus with the girls, I think it's amazing for world cricket that what the tournament did.
Yeah, I think Thailand was a classic case in point. They basically got together a group of softball players 12 years ago, and they turned them into a team that qualified through for the World Cup, which is just absolutely brilliant. So, no complacency, a long way to go, but I think Australia has got really strong leadership credentials in this space, and just absolutely thrilled that the FIFA Women's World Cup soccer is now coming to Australia and New Zealand in 2023. That's going to be another level. That's going to be just a massive, massive event.
Amazing. And of course, then your career turned slightly because COVID hit, the men's tournament got cancelled, and all of a sudden you got called out of your nice existence to take on a baptism of fire, to be, the interim role for Cricket Australia as the CEO, as Kevin Roberts moved on. And a lot came out during that period in terms of the financials, the general public understanding that Cricket Australia was running out of money, and then the risk that, are we going to get a summer? What happens? And then you've got the TV, all the TV rights wanting to renegotiate, and you've put right into the fire. And I sort of thought to myself at that time, God, Nick, that's amazing. What an opportunity, and wow, it must be fascinating role. And of course, I was also thinking all this stuff in the paper saying the next CEO of Cricket Australia could be an Englishman, and they were talking about Andrew Strauss, but we've got Nick Hockley. And talk us through the how it's been managing and navigating through what has been, for any CEO, a very, very difficult period.
Yeah. Well, I mean, probably I haven't had too much time to reflect on it, really, because it's been pretty intense, and it's certainly been the busiest and hardest I've worked in my career. But very acutely aware of the privilege of this role and the responsibility, and I've learned a huge amount. I was a bit like a deer in the headlights to begin with, but I think the experience on the major events has proved really helpful. I've tried to think about this season, and it has been about survival this season, like it's a massive project. It's actually a series of massive projects. So you compare us to NRL, AFL, they've got one domestic league. We've got 3 formats of the game. We've got male, female, we've got domestic, international. So we've in effect had 10 competitions. And then the entire team has been in Melbourne. They haven't been able to leave their houses. So, I think it's been actually thinking, and then you've had the uncertainty of the virus. So, it's been actually breaking it down. It's a big jigsaw puzzle, looking at all the individual pieces, getting really organized, getting the right teams on the right thing. So poor old Brian, I think, is in quarantine at the moment, but we had a quarantine management team that we stood up to help bring players in, whether that's the BBL or our returning IPL players, India. So it has been about breaking it up into bite-sized chunks. It's also the real realization for me during this period is, again, the privileged position that cricket holds in Australia. I mean, when I did my citizenship test, one of the questions was who's Don Bradman, and it's quite incredible. And what that's translated in is just a huge amount of support and help from so many different people. So, I think we normally get great support from governments, but we've been actually entirely reliant on governments to get the season happening, and to get the season happening safely, to get our international players into the country. And we've had to work, much more closely with our counterparties, whether that's the BCCI. I mean, the hours we've had on calls with the BCCI through the night on the operational plans. I mean, normally what would happen, you get the schedule logged in, and then they'd phone their travel agent, and then they'd arrive in the country and book the hotel, away you go. It's been so. I think what that's done is I've just been overwhelmed how everyone's just worked together, and I think the fact that the CA team have been unable to leave Melbourne has actually really helped foster close working relationships with both the Players Association and with the states and territories. So as an example, we played the first 4 rounds of the Sheffield Shield in Adelaide, and that was primarily delivered by the SACA in conjunction with us, which, I think that team, the operational delivery team for the Sheffield Shield, have now been through the trenches together. They stood that up in 5 weeks. They're friends for life. And that's one of countless examples. So it's been challenging, but there's nothing like a crisis. And there's nothing more rewarding than solving problems as a team. Yeah. And I think, I'm sure that resonates with a lot of the business leaders on this call.
I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, we've all had to learn to work in alternate environments, learn to deal with crisis on the go, brutal prioritization of the things you can't control and how you work to it. And then all of the challenges that you'd say you would draw on from your experiences of Olympics or of World Cups, of that logistical challenge of moving people around. And what about for the players? I mean, I think Pat Cummings sort of was released from the T20s to allow, otherwise he won't be able to go home physically until April. I mean, how are the players bearing up? How do you deal with a mental health issue of players in bubbles? How's that working?
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting one. I mean, I think, again, I'd be interested in Brian's insights, but I mean, international cricketers, they're on the road, they're in hotels, they're moving around, for pretty much 11 months of the year as is. So it's not an entirely kind of alien experience, but it certainly, we went to England in September. That we played in a very lockdown, stayed at the same hotel as the ground at the Ageas Bowl and Old Trafford, couldn't go out. So it is a much more constrained environment. Fortunately for us now, things have opened up, but we still, in order to move safely around the country, we need to make sure that people within the hub are not interacting with people outside the hub. And that's mainly so they don't get caught up in hotspots and that we're then all locked down. But I think what's we've seen, through the leadership of a number of people across a number of sports, people like Moses Enriques, Will Pukowski, is it's less taboo to now kind of talk about mental health issues. And I think that's the first step. We've also employed a mental health lead across Cricket Australia, who's doing a terrific job. And what we're trying to do there is, rather than deal with issues when they present, is actually trying to anticipate issues before they present. So working again very closely with the Players Association, through the BBL, we're now facilitating being able to leave the hub, spend time with family. Equally, families come into the hub around the Christmas period. So there's no perfect answer. People respond differently. It's interesting. Some people would rather, if they're focusing on cricket, be away from their families, just be able to solely focus. Others, I think David Warner's again, has spoken publicly about how he's really missed his family over this period. But it's very much trying to put in place the holistic plans, but then also keeping close to people on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and amazing. I mean, it's amazing, like you say. Everyone adjusts differently, but we're here now, and it's awesome to see the Big Bash on TV, and everyone's back fired up. But of course, the main show's tomorrow at Adelaide, and tell us a little bit about the game and how you're thinking about it for the team. It's almost, as an Englishman in Australia, and then having watched so many Ashes series, it's always England, Australia, but the Australia has become almost as big, right? And particularly for Indian-based fans in Australia, the grounds are just a wash of colour of that. It's just such a big series.
Yeah, no, I think you've summed it up well. I mean, but I suppose the other thing is it's actually just a massively historic occasion in the sense that it's the first ever day-night test between Australia and India. Yeah, which is absolutely massive. I think it's taken on additional significance given the fact that last time India were here, Australia lost, which hasn't actually happened. Losing on home soil doesn't happen very often. So I think the stakes are really high, and I think India are coming in with a very settled side. Australia, we thought we were kind of sport for riches, but we've had this. We've had a few of the young guns put their hands up during the Shield. We've been, there's been a fair few soft tissue injuries in these couple of concussions. So there's, that's the great thing about Test cricket, storylines within storylines. And no, I think you're right. We went to be playing the World Cup, the T20 World Cup here, and within pretty much 20 minutes, all the India matches just sold out like that. Yeah. So it's just for the fans here, for the Indian fans here. It's just great that they're going to see India, and I think for the cricketing world, it's just a and then timed with talk of vaccines, it's just and particularly for Australia, I mean, cricket is synonymous with the summer, so people talk about it being the soundtrack to the summer. So I'm just very much looking forward to settling in and watching what will be a riveting test series.
And when you said before about the privileged and honoured position, of course, any Prime Minister says in Australia that the second most important job is Prime Minister, the first is captain of the cricket team of Australia. I've got a question here that's come in from Nicole Breeze, and going back to our conversation about women's cricket. Women's cricket's been a huge highlight of the year so far, from T20 World Cup to the quality of the WBBL. As a female cricket fan and a bit of a purist, i.e. Test cricket fan, I'd love to see more of the long form cricket for women. What's the vision on that front?
Well, I think what we've seen is with the Women's Ashes, we've seen this multi-format series work brilliantly. The players absolutely love it. So the Women's Ashes, for those who maybe haven't followed it so closely, we have a Test match, we have an ODI series and a T20 series. And each of the different matches have points which then sum up, and the team with the most points gets awarded the Ashes. That's something that we're talking to other cricketing countries about. We'd love to play a multi-format series against India. So I think it's a case of watch this space. I think the thing that we talked earlier about Thailand and Papua New Guinea. I think T20 cricket will remain the growth vehicle for women's cricket. So you're probably unlikely to see multi-test series. i.e. 5 test series like the men's Ashes, but certainly we'd love to expand the number of countries that we compete against in multi-format series.
And will you, final question, then we'll bring Brian in, but will you see, you know, the big thing for England, of course, was the 100 that unfortunately didn't quite get off the ground because of COVID, but will you see another format come in that's shorter, so you're sort of moving away from the longer form? What's the sort of view of Cricket Australia or the ICC on that?
I mean, I think the jury's out a bit on the 100. It'd be very interesting to see how that goes. I mean, I can understand why they've done it. Again, I don't know whether we're Chatham House rules here, but you know, the derivation of the 100 was to have a smaller number of metro-based franchises, because county cricket, as you know, there's 18 counties, and you know, many of them in smaller, you know, smaller towns like, you know, Worcester and the like. So it's how do you? It's very much about what. It's the same theory as we employed for the Big Bash 10 years ago, which is how do you bring a new generation of fans into the game? And so I think it'll go really well. Do I think that the 100 will take off as another format? You know, I think one of the big issues we've got in cricket is, you know, T20 is really 10 years old, and not only have you got much more international T20 cricket, World Cups, but you've also got big domestic leagues like the IPL and the BBL. So congestion is an issue. So I don't think there's room. I don't think there's room for more. And I think with the T20 World Cup, that's the preeminent shortest form of the game. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, one question before I get Brian in, just on the attendances. So you know, people in Sydney, tickets and how many will be allowed into the? Is it full house at Sydney, Melbourne?
Yeah, it's full house in Sydney. 30,000 in Melbourne for Boxing Day. So far this summer, literally there hasn't been a spare ticket for international cricket that we've been able to sell that we haven't sold.
Yeah.
We push pretty hard to try and get more for Boxing Day, but Boxing Day will be the first time there's been more than 500 people in one place in Melbourne since March the 8th. So, you know, I think it's what Sydney's had. It's had the opportunity with the NRL Grand Final and other events to kind of get comfortable and build confidence. Yeah, we're just delighted there'll be a crowd. I mean, if there's one other lesson that's really been at the core of how we've navigated the pandemic, it has been about holding your nerve and biding your time. A lot of people were calling, even in, you know, early October, they were calling, you know, there's no way Boxing Day is going to happen because Victoria was in the midst of the second wave. We were very strong, and we said, or certainly I was very strong, the first time we're going to think about whether we move Boxing Day is the third week of November. And of course, we'd had by then 20 days of 0 cases. So yeah, it's just that, you know, bide your time. And, you know, I think we'll have limited crowds at Adelaide, and Boxing Day we'll have 100% for Sydney and for Brisbane. And then hopefully the back end of the Big Bash, everything's completely opened up.
Brilliant. And there is one final question just on the Q&A I've seen through from a rather cheeky participant by the name of David Moyle. And his question is, the Ashes is here next year. Who will you be barracking for as the CEO of Cricket Australia and as an Englishman? You've already declared you've become an Australian, so maybe you don't want to answer that one, or maybe you do. What's the answer?
I'll answer that. Well, the first thing I'd say is if you look at the coaches of the English rugby union, rugby league and cricket teams, they're all Australian. Yeah. So I suppose it's just a bit of redressing the balance. Look, I support Australia against everybody apart from England. I think in this role you have to be, but I have to, you know, obviously professionally the best interest of Australian cricket is what I wake up and think about 24/7. So.
Very good answer. You should be in politics, Nick. Okay, let's bring the god that is Mr. Brian Lara on. If Brian could join us, I'm almost speechless thinking I'm in the great company of you, even though you're down the road. How many days into quarantine are you?
I think I've lost count, and I get a phone call every day, twice a day, asking me about my mental health, my physical health, but also my mental health. So I'm going a bit crazy up here. I think it's day 5 or day 6. So I'm out on the 23rd of December.
And what are you doing to keep fit in your room? press ups?
Well, I got a TRX. I'm doing a little bit of YouTube fitness work, so it's been going good, and eating very healthy. That's the most important part.
Man. And you're a big fan of Australia, right? You're obviously stunning 270 odd you scored here in the mid 90s as one of your big knocks. And your daughter's named Sydney after Sydney. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so
I begged her mother for, if I can do that with my first daughter. So if it was a boy, it's going to be Sydney. A girl, Sydney. So I was lucky to get that.
Good job you didn't score a massive 100 at Headingley or Edgbaston.
Or at Lahore.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You score hundreds everywhere, so you could have picked your ground. But and what brings you to Sydney? What are you here for the summer?
Well, I'm here working with going to be working with Channel 7. Sorry, at the Big Bash, right. And so that starts for me on the 26th of December. I get out on the 23rd. Another reason, I don't know if you know, but I have a little boy here called Zende. He's 3 years old. So I'll be rushing up to Brisbane after my quarantine to spend Christmas with him.
Brilliant. And you played in the bushfire relief game, didn't you, as well last year?
Yeah, that was my last. No, it was not my last cricket game. I actually played in a road safety tournament in India. So, but I did play in that Big Bash in Melbourne. It was supposed to be in Sydney. I think there was a lot of rain at the time, and I think we went down to St Kilda, and that was I think a very successful event.
Yeah, it was great, and I actually remember watching you many times in England playing for the West Indies, but also in a charity game for Marley Marshall when Malcolm Marshall passed away at club in London. And you very generously allowed Rory Bremner, the comedian, to bowl you. Absolutely hopeless. He bowled these big pies that came out the sky, and you purposely played over the top of it. And Rory Bremner probably will talk to anyone about his cricketing success of getting Brian Lara out. Do you remember that?
I remember the game. I don't remember who got me out, but yeah.
I think you wanted to just go and have a beer, Brian. I don't think you wanted to be.
It might have been.
How are you feeling? I mean, Nick was mentioning it. You're obviously in isolation now, in sort of for the next few days. But when you talk to your fellow professionals, the sort of West Indies teams now. I mean, they were in Manchester for a period, playing in the first games after COVID or during COVID. How are they coping mentally? And to the point that Nick said that you, as a professional, you've spent every month traveling around largely, so you're away from home a long time. What's different this time around, and how are they coping?
Well, I had a chat with Jason Holder after the England tour, and he felt that it was kind of tough, especially staying at the cricket ground itself and in Southampton and Manchester. He felt that the players were struggling to cope with it. Let me tell you something. When you come from a small archipelago like the Caribbean, where each island's got a couple 100,000 people, the square mileage of each island is very small. One of the things that was very satisfying and a joy for me as a cricketer was going to bigger countries, going to England, going to Australia, getting to see the place, walking through the towns. That's a huge part of touring for a West Indian cricketer. And I felt that that now is missing. These guys are turning up to play cricket. They're in quarantine from the bus to the cricket ground, back to the hotel. So that is definitely going to be an issue. How they're dealing with it, they're not dealing with it very well on the cricket field, losing against England and also against New Zealand. And but it's at the end of the day, you're making that sacrifice. You understand what's happening with the pandemic, and you've got to deal with it. So I believe that is causing a bit of a stir with the West Indies players. I think it is affecting their performances, but they've got to snap out of it. And Phil Simmons and his group, they've got to get the players playing a little bit more professionally. Yeah,
and what's your view there in terms of what does the next couple of years look like? Some talented players coming through. Will they ever get back to the sort of your era and before, when they were invincible, you couldn't touch them in the sort of 70s and 80s? Is cricket still holding the same passion for West Indians as it did for West Indian child, if he has a choice of cricket or something else, are people still loving the game?
Yeah, they're still loving the game. There is a little bit more distraction. Of course, technology in today's world is different to what it was 30, 40 years ago. The options, the American market opening up, other American sports. And okay, it's been diluted. It's going to be diluted in terms of the number of players, youngsters wanting to play cricket. But I still feel the best at the game at an early age is still presenting themselves. And I don't think that we're harnessing that talent very well. I mean, we might only have maybe 400, 450 test cricketers in 90 years of test history. So we don't need that much players. We just need the very best to be playing, and we need to harness that talent. And what I believe that the West Indies think tank should be doing is trying to really and truly overhaul the way that we play the game. We are exciting cricketers. We've been known for that around the world for many years. The great Sir Gary Sobers, Sir Vivian Richards, all the fast bowlers that we have created, and tremendous talent. And we've always been crowd pleasers. But I believe for us to get back to the top or even turn the corner is that we have to start playing and restructuring the way we play the cricket. If we don't have the same talent, we have to have a different mindset, a different plan moving forward. And I believe that we are still trying to find out one or two players that have that natural ability to take us out of the slump. I would personally want us to see us graph out a draw, play 5 days of test cricket, move on. If you draw, if you lose, even that is a success. And from there, build on it. And I remember England did that in the late 80s and early 90s. We were punishing them 5-0 in the mid 80s. They got to us about the 1990 series. They were drawing against the West Indies 2-2 with Sir Vivian Richards playing. And eventually, 5-10 years down the line, and up till today, we cannot beat England. So again, I think that there's a process to get back to the top, and we're not looking to do or start that process. Until we do so, I think we're going to be languishing in the position that we're in.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I mean, in the shorter forms, still, they're relatively successful, can compete, get to quarterfinals, semi-finals of major events. It's just that long form, the 5-day test, where they're falling away, right?
Yeah, which confirms what I'm saying. The fact that if you can play a T20 and win 2 World Cups and do decently in the 50 over version of the game, it says that our attrition level is at this time what it is in terms of T20. We are exciting players. It doesn't take a big plan to win a T20 game. It takes 1 or 2 good performances. You got a Chris Gayle or Andrew Russell, Dwayne Bravo, Pollard. These guys can turn things on its head in a matter of short space of time. But ask them to play 15 sessions of cricket, it's going to be very difficult. So we have to at least look at that and see how we can improve on it.
And does Phil Simmons and the guys, they still call you in for advice? Are you involved at all in the West Indies Cricket Board, or?
Yeah, I've been in a couple camps before, but spending a few days with young batsmen, I don't think it's enough. I think it's something that's got to be 365 every time there is a tour or preparation for a tour. Get someone in, not necessarily myself, but get some of the greats or get good batting coaches. I'm talking in the batting discipline, because I believe that is the one area that if you don't lose 20 wickets in a test match, you shouldn't lose it. So if we can get the young batsmen getting some advice, and not necessarily the practical side and technique, but understanding how it is to build an innings, the mental side of the game. And I'm sure Sir Vivian Richards, Gordon Greenwich, all these guys are around the West Indies. I'm not sure how many phone calls they get from our CWI in terms of coming out to help.
Yeah, and tell me, I've always wanted to ask someone of your absolute legendary status, how on earth did you concentrate for the amount of time you would be at the wicket? I mean, you 501 for Warwickshire, the 400 twice against England, the 300s, the 200s, like it's unbelievable concentration, which is what you're saying is missing today. But what was it? How did you do that at the wicket? What was it? What got you through every session?
Well, I think it started right here. If you want to blame anybody or any place, it started right here in Sydney. And I was not a big score of runs in school cricket. I mean, you played school cricket, it's either 40 overs or you bat on a Friday afternoon and you finish on a Saturday evening. and you have to get in, getting a result. So it was never that opportunity to score big. We played under 19 cricket in the Caribbean. It was 3 days as well. And when I got to Sydney in 1992, 93, and I came off the field after scoring my first 100, there was a rain break. And Rohan Kanai, our coach at the time, the legendary Rohan Kanai, said to me, set your stalls out. And I asked him what he meant. He said, your next inning starts at 0. And it immediately clicked with me exactly what he wanted me to do. We had to save the test match. Australia already had 500 runs on the board. And as I went back out and I started scoring runs, the electronic scoreboard came up with different numbers that were just coming down and mine was going up. And I just fell in love with it. And from that day onwards, 50 or 100 was not enough. I wanted to bat 5 sessions. I know most of the times, most test teams bat for 5 sessions. That's what I wanted to be there. I want to be there very early, and I wanted to be the last man out in the field.
Amazing, amazing. And have you got any advice for Nick on the line for Cricket Australia? Any pearls of wisdom to give him as a CEO of the game? Anything you want to pass on? He grew up outside Edgbaston, so he saw you play many times in county cricket. Any pearls of wisdom, Brian?
Be a little bit more definitive when you're choosing which country you're supporting at the moment. I think he was a bit caught in between England and Australia, but I think it's a great opportunity he has to run Cricket Australia, and from his perspective, bring something new to the game. It's of course trying times, but I think the best CEOs strive in times like this, and I think that he seems to have the ability to do so, and I want to wish him all the very best. But it's a great job. I mean, to be in Australia, it's a great place. His wife is Australian, and I'm sure he's going to have a wonderful time.
Any comments, Nick?
Oh, thank you, Brian. That means a great deal. And no, thank you for your inspiration over many, many years. And thank you for your sacrifice this summer and being here with us, because we're very privileged to have you here for the summer.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the credentials, actually. Thank you for passing me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, Johnny, we have to hand back to you now, do we, on the timing? Yep. I could about 5 days here in a test match asking Brian questions and Nick questions, but you run a very disciplined show here. When time is up, Johnny. So are we on time?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrew. And what a pleasure it has been for us. Firstly, Andrew, this was a long spell, 45 minutes, bowling to Hockley and Lara. Nick's dream, Lara coming out to join Hockley at middle of the innings. A great flourish from Hockley opening the innings. Brian Lara closing as always, right down to stumps. So thank you, all of you, for joining. What a privilege and a pleasure. And Nick especially, you have an amazing job, an amazing dream. You're living the dream for all of us and living our hopes and aspirations, not only for cricket, but for our community in general. And we have our business sentiment survey, which we invite everybody to complete, just how you're feeling. I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank our CEO, Tanya, for amazing leadership of the Circle this year and for having the vision to launch SportsConnect, which is what the issues we've talked about today. Business, sport, mental health issues, inclusion, diversity, everything that binds us together as communities, and we can learn from each other. And to Georgia online for organizing all of our briefings, along with Tracy, and for Rob Wickham. Robert, thank you very much for making sure we got Brian. A great privilege you could join us. So ladies and gentlemen, the results of the survey, normally we can see them. Anyway, everybody's feeling better. Nick, you're leading the charge. The soundtrack of summer is cricket. Brian, we look forward to your dulcet tones and watching you on our screens. Andrew, thank you. And everybody, thank you for joining our program for this year. Over 250 briefings. We've wanted to connect people at this time. We hope we have. We hope we've built new communities. Stay healthy, stay safe, enjoy the cricket, and have a wonderful, wonderful break to everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Johnny.